Welcome back, everybody, to the You Ask We podcast, the show where you ask the questions, they answer them, and I'm just the guy in the middle. This week, we have an extremely awesome guest for you guys. He is a nationally recognized entertainment and IP law scholar and an expert witness consultant for copyright, trademark, publicity rights, and entertainment contract disputes. He's had plenty of amazing experiences on the field and tons of stories with big time artists. And now, currently, he spends his time as my professor at Southwestern Law School. I want to give a warm welcome to my professor, Mr. Kevin Greene. Professor, how's it going?
Good. Good morning, Eden. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Thank you for coming on. So,
Thanks.
the way the show normally works is people submit questions that I ask on the show, and I have them all here on my phone. Sorry about the green screen. But yeah, I have all the questions on my phone, but the way the show works is the first question always comes from me, and that's what's new.
What's new? What's new is it's the end of the semester, so it's
Yeah.
a crazy time of the year, but always exciting. And
Yeah.
I'm just glad to be able to take a break after a very, very tumultuous semester of lots and lots of activities.
Yeah, you and me both. And finals is coming up right now, full speed ahead. So yeah, just looking forward to that pretty much. But yeah, so now let's get into the questions that people submitted. Um, Kyle, for example, is curious, what got you into entertainment law in the first place?
So I told this story to the students that when I was in law school, I pretty much went through 3 years of law school without having any idea of what I would ultimately do.
Mhm.
And then I think the seed for entertainment law was kind of planted as entertainment slash media law when I clerked for the Michigan Supreme Court. And I had a case about a newspaper and a defamation case. So defamation is kind of in the zone of entertainment, even though that didn't end up being my specialty. Then when I took my first job, which was a job at a big Wall Street firm, the client was Warner Brothers HBO, and we had to be down at MTV doing depositions, doing document production, look at cable affiliation agreements and all sorts of assignments and copyright stuff. And that's when I really got interested in the entertainment field.
So it was a long, winding road, pretty much. You started off somewhere completely different, and then you got into entertainment law because it was one of your first clients.
Exactly. I thought I was going to be a civil rights lawyer, but I went right to Wall Street, and then I just happened to be assigned to Warner Brothers, who was a big client of the firm.
How do you think you would have done as a civil rights lawyer?
I feel like my work is civil rights oriented anyway, because my work about African American artists and, trying to win them their rights under copyright law is to me civil rights work in a sense. It's not traditional, but I feel like I'm, in the fight to help people who don't have a lot. And that really is the heart of what civil rights law is about.
Yeah, and that's really amazing and inspirational. And speaking of civil rights and different minorities and groups, um, it's true that you have a Jewish family. Is that correct? Like you married a Jewish woman, have Jewish
That
kids.
is true. Yes, yes. And my kids
Uh,
both had bar mitzvahs. They're not very observant, but I think that's pretty normal as well.
Yeah, so it's like speaking on that, this question comes from Mary, our fellow classmate. Having a Jewish family, has that influenced your view on entertainment law at all? And if so, how?
I wouldn't say so. I don't see those two as very, very related.
Fair enough.
Historically, Jews and African Americans have kind of dominated the entertainment industry, but in different ways. The African Americans typically through their performances, and the Jewish people typically, well, because they were excluded from so many things, one of the things that they could do was work as managers and ultimately later on as executives, et cetera, in entertainment companies. Um, so, there's always going to be that connection. I think there's a shared kind of history between Jews and African Americans of oppression. And so, but in terms of family, no, I mean, I don't see any connection between those two things.
I mean, it's like, do you see like anything in your family specifically that could like influence you within entertainment law or like things that may come up in general that makes you think
I mean,
about?
I will say this. I actually brought our cousin, Jessica De La Rocha, who is a showrunner and a producer for reality TV shows, my wife's cousin, my cousin, in to talk to the class. So that was really amazing to hear her views as somebody on the ground producing shows. And we couldn't do it in the basic entertainment class just because there's not enough time. It's a shorter class, and I have to get through more materials. But certainly, we have people on my wife's side who are in the entertainment industry and in different capacities, and even in Argentina because they originally came from Argentina, singers and performers. So that's some influence, I guess you could say.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So this next question comes in from Bailey. She's curious, what advice would you give for people who want to get into the field of entertainment law? What would you suggest that they do?
Oh, that's great. Who was asking the question?
Bailey.
Bailey. Oh, sure. Thanks, Bailey. Uh, you know, there's not one way to do it. There's a lot of different routes you can go, but I think number one is you really have to have commitment. To get in the entertainment industry is almost like being an actor or a performer. So that means going through quite a lot of rejection, right? If you're an actor, you've got to do a lot of auditions and get rejected. But I think the people I see who succeed, and we have so many Southwestern graduates in the entertainment industry, we really punch way above our weight. I mean, Southwestern is best known as a school that produces entertainment lawyers, quite honestly, and IP lawyers. But I, of course, take the classes. You'd be amazed at how many people after 3 years of law school will come to me. I've never met them, never seen them. They've never taken any of the classes, and they're like, "I want to be in the entertainment industry," and I find that very unfortunate, right? Because they can get a lot of knowledge and information right while they're in law school. I also recommend that people network like crazy, and this, Eden. So it's not going to happen sitting in your room. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to happen when you get yourself out there. And the more people you can meet and connect with, the higher your chances. That combined, as I said, with your commitment to the craft, to learning about copyright law, trademark law, rights to publicity, learning about the contracts, right? Actually reading the various contracts, sound recording contracts, motion picture distribution contracts, video game development contracts. There are all kinds of books that you can get to kind of become conversant with that. And also, I'm very big on people writing about entertainment issues, and you can do that in my advanced entertainment class and advanced copyright class and other classes. And trying to publish that, because these days you can get published at so many venues for publications. If you'll publish an article about copyright in music or about trademark in video games or right of publicity, and that will put you head and shoulders above most people because most people simply won't do it. It also gives them something to evaluate your research ability, your writing ability. So I'm very big on people having some sort of product, right? That's your product that you can show. You need to have business cards. We just took a whole bunch of students to USC's massive entertainment conference last month, and everybody was there from Warner Brothers to the Directors Guild to all the big agencies, CAA and all the rest of them, Live Nation, YouTube, all the people were there. There's a golden opportunity for you to meet them, and the easiest way to meet somebody is with a business card. You don't even have to say anything. Just if you're shy, just hand them the business card. That's a connection, right? You get their business card as well, and you follow up. The people who are willing to do those things to really learn about the law and the doctrine and the contracts, and are willing to, meet people and network who are willing to write about this area, showing their passion for it and their skill, are the people who are going to really be ahead of the game. And we have people in our class who are doing those things, who I'm very proud of.
Yeah, and I really couldn't agree more about how important networking is. It's actually a big factor as to why I started the show too, because I would network with certain sports lawyers, and I'd ask them how do I become like you, right? And they would all say like, oh, you just got to network, get out there, meet different people, go to events, start a podcast. Every single one of them said start a podcast because it's the easiest way to like invite people and talk to them and get to know them, and it's a mutual benefit too. So it was I mean, I've wanted to start a podcast for a while, but that was a very big um influence as to like why I actually did it and going with it. So I'm
That's
really,
great. I mean, you're doing the right things, and you'll meet a ton of people that way, and you can showcase some of your skills as well.
yeah, God willing, hopefully, you know. The more people I get, the better. So hopefully it works out. So this next question comes from Mikey from New York. Are there any Generation Z rappers that you have worked with closely?
No, I mean, I when I was practicing, I worked with old school rappers, including, Chuck D, Public Enemy. We represented our firm represented Redman, some of the Wu-Tang people, but I haven't really worked with the more contemporary rappers. I've been on litigations as an expert. One of them was against J. Cole, another one was against Jason Derulo. So I've been on the other side of them, going after them for copyright infringement as the expert, right? But
Wow.
not as representing them.
Wow. That's really interesting. I mean, what was it like working with people from like the Wu-Tang and Public Enemy and stuff like that? What was it like working with them?
I one of my foundational experiences, and I talk about this in my book, The Copyright House of Horrors, in the preface, was that I was tasked with taking Chuck D this massive check that he had gotten in a settlement because a company called that makes St. Ides malt liquor, the 40-ounce liquor, had used his voice in a radio commercial. Which, as you know, having studied the right of publicity, you can't do that, right? Voice is protected here in California, and so the company had no defense. You can't use Chuck D's voice, particularly since he has been vehemently against those high content alcohol 40-ounce products in the African American community. So they really just had to settle the case, and I had to go to the bank, get the check drawn, and fly to an undisclosed location where I gave Chuck D the check. And all these years later, he'll never forget me as long as he lives, because when you give someone a check of that magnitude, they don't forget you, right? So that was one of the highlights, I think, of my career at that time, because in law school I had idolized Public Enemy. I'd loved all those old school rappers, Eric B and Rakim, Public Enemy, Wu-Tang, etc. So that was very exciting.
Yeah, it's like I'm a really big fan of Wu-Tang too. So it's like when you
Yes.
mentioned them, I remember actually, I think it was before your first copyright class, like people were giving pitches for their electives for school, and you were talking about your copyright course, and you were talking about how you worked with people like Public Enemy and Wu-Tang, and I was like, whoa, this guy's like, I gotta be in this class.
Yes,
So
those are great times. Those are great times. Now more than often than not, I love working as an expert because it keeps me fresh in the game, keeps me in court, keeps me in litigation and all the pleadings. And so I just love that. And I thought I was going to be bought on a case that was bought by another old school rap group, very famous, obviously, in the copyright space, Two Live Crew, because right now they're in a battle some of the original members are in a battle to recapture rights. I ultimately wasn't brought on the case, but it was very interesting getting a window into that.
yeah, it was great. I mean, who would you say was the coolest person you worked with in the music space?
George Clinton, by far, the king of funk.
Glenn?
Yeah. And I got to know George Clinton very well because in that case, I was an expert consultant. I wasn't an expert witness. So I was on his team to try to save his sound recordings that were trying to be taken from him by this law firm that he owed money to. And ultimately, we weren't able to. And I got to argue in the Ninth Circuit, which I never thought I would do in that case. And but George Clinton, who is, one of there's no hip hop without George Clinton and James Brown. Their DNA is at the foundation of hip hop. Those two guys, and to really work with him, get to know him, and such a influential, person, and yet so down to earth, and he almost felt like a second father or something to me. So it was just great working with George Clinton. We had to follow him all over the country on that case. We at his shows, and so the best one was in Seattle. This is right after marijuana was legalized, and there's a place called Showbox in Seattle. The Seattle people know about it. It's like a pretty small venue. They had just legalized, and I think everybody in that place had lit up. So I wasn't smoking, but just walking in there, you just got stoned. And when George Clinton does a show, I thought that building was going to collapse, and I loved that everybody was there. Every race was there. Every race, creed, color, every age group, people 70 years old, people 20 years old, just how he's able to bring together so many people of different backgrounds. But I literally thought the place was going to fall down. The place was rocking so much. I thought this building might collapse tonight. Particularly when he played One Nation Under a Groove, the people went crazy. So yeah, that was a great experience. The other part of that was when we did LA at the Chinese theater or wherever we were playing in LA, they wouldn't let us in, which tells you everything you know about LA. So we only got in because one of the band members came and said, "Hey man, let those guys in. Those are the lawyers." That tells you everything you need to know about LA. That's the only place we ever had a problem.
It's like unless your face is immediately recognized, it's going
Yeah,
to be impossible
exactly.
to get in anywhere. It's
Right,
ridiculous.
exactly.
Yeah, no, it's like it's actually funny. I remember one time it's like a few friends from New York actually came to Los Angeles to visit and they wanted to go out on a Saturday night to these clubs they heard about in New York. And we find ourselves waiting outside Hyde for like an hour trying to get in. We don't get in that night. And the bouncer literally comes up to me and asks me, it's like, come on, man, you gotta like give me something to get in. Like, what could you do?
That's how it works.
Let's
Yep,
work,
that's how it
let's work
works.
it out.
If
At
you
the
showed up with Kesha, though, you would have gotten in.
Yeah, no, it's like, but it was funny because when he said that, it's like at the time I was like kind of doing music a little bit as like a hobby, like nothing serious. And it's like I told him like I could perform, and he was like, "Dude, just go, get
Right,
out."
right,
Like
right.
LA, it's a whole different currency here. It's nuts. Yeah, but that's great. I mean, this next question comes from Hannah, like going into like working with all these big people that you've worked with. Hannah wants to know what would you say is the best or the worst thing working with these high profile clients?
Well, obviously, it's nice to whether they're high profile or low profile. The goal is always to help people.
Of course.
For it. Fortunately, I haven't had to deal with a lot of what you would call prima donnas or people who are very difficult to work with.
Mhm.
Um, Mainly when I was at the law firm, the entertainment law firm, because after I left Wall Street, I went to Frankfurt. At that time, it was Frankfurt Garbus Klein and Sells. Now it's Frankfurt Kernet Klein and Sells. They are the top entertainment firm in New York, and I I was junior, so I wasn't really necessarily interfacing on a heavy duty basis. But there was one person, I won't say his name, who was a very famous photographer that we represented, and he was known as being extraordinarily difficult. And I was just afraid to even, interact with him at all at that point. But I've been blessed that I haven't really had super duper difficult people to who I've had to deal with, and everybody I've worked with has really been a pleasure to work with, quite honestly. So I can't really say I'm trying to search my memory banks for a negative experience. Usually the negative experiences are going to be with the lawyers in your own firm, not the clients. And particularly in New York, which is a very rough and tumble place, and particularly my era of going through, there wasn't a lot of kindness that was going to be shown to you. So but having said that, the person I worked for, who was the roughest person to work with, a person who yelled and screamed. And I'll never forget once I drafted, I don't know if it was a contract, a memorandum, whatever it was. And he came out of the office through the hallway screaming, "You don't know anything. You don't know anything." And I thought, wait a minute, I went to law school, right? I worked on Wall Street before. I should know something, right? It's like, but that person, I learned more from him than probably any lawyer I ever worked with. So, you got to take the good with the bad when it comes to that. But
Honestly,
clients, I don't find are usually the stress point. That hasn't been my experience.
yeah. Honestly, I feel like New York in general is just a place of tough love.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's not as bad as it was, 25 years ago, but it was bad 25 years ago,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like my dad first came to America like through New York. Like that's his first place. So it's like he has all those experiences and everything. And he also like pretty much became a New Yorker through that. So
Yes, and you know what? You guys' generation, you don't deal with that well, I don't think. With somebody, in your face and yelling at you. I don't know how you guys would approach that.
I feel like it depends on the culture.
Yes, yes.
Like when you grow up with it, like Middle Eastern kids or other like minorities, like I feel like they've grown up with it, so it's like perfectly fine. And
Right,
like
they grew up with it at home.
like me
Starting with
personally,
your father.
I can handle it totally fine. But
Right,
like
right, right.
someone who like never experienced that whatsoever and was pampered their whole life, they might not take it so well.
The
But
fact that I had been in the Marine Corps helped because obviously there's a lot of yelling and screaming. So people yelling and screaming don't bother me. Right? You can get in my
yeah,
face and scream at me. That won't bother me at all.
it's like it's all about just staying calm and collected. Like
That's
that's
right. That's
that's
right. Exactly.
yeah, couldn't agree more. This next question comes from Molly. She wants to know what would you say is a secret passion or interest of yours?
That's a good question.
Mhm.
One thing that I am very passionate about is I love history. So I'm a real history buff. So right now I'm reading again the history of the Roman Empire. And in terms of my viewing habits, I love I spend time in China. at a previous law school, we had a program in China. So I got to go to China in 2014, 2016, 2017 for the summer. And I just love the culture, love the language, love the food, right? And so I'm really obsessed with Chinese history, ancient Chinese history. So a lot of the shows, I'm watching the Marco Polo show now, which is set back in the, the Mongolian dynasty period. And I think in a previous life, I probably was like a Chinese, royalty or something, because I really gravitate towards that, the ancient Chinese history,
Yeah.
Ming Dynasty, going back to those periods.
Honestly, it's funny you mentioned those two things because one, my dad loves the Marco Polo show.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
That's
that
amazing.
that's really funny. And secondly, with the Roman Empire thing, are you aware of the trend on TikTok right now? Or
No.
not right now, like a little while ago.
Yeah.
But there was this trend for a while where women would ask their significant others, like 90% of the time guys, um, they would ask like, oh, like how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And like the guys would just be like, it would just always be like, oh, like once a week, like or like once a day, stuff like that.
So
And it's
that's a
why do
thing.
you
I didn't
think
know that
about
was a thing. Yes, yes.
yeah, it was a whole trend. It's really funny. So it's really funny
Right,
you
right.
mentioned that. Like I
One
thought
of the
it,
things I like about that and what I've learned is that, they had scholars then, and the scholars played a critical role. Well, they weren't professors, but they were playing the same role. They played a critical role in those societies. They were the conscience of those societies. They were the ones that could go to the emperor when no one else could and say, look, emperor, you're doing the wrong thing. You're not leading the people right. And I think we need that. We need academics to get back to that and be the conscious and say, because we have tenure, we're protected, right? We can't be fired for our views. So I'd like to see that rather than, people just trying to line their pockets with money.
yeah, true. But we're a really long way from getting back to those days, I think.
Yes, yes,
Well, the way money rules everything right now. It's a lot.
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this next question comes from me. I'm actually kind of curious about it because we were talking about all these clients that you worked with and who you enjoyed working with, who you had fun with. Was there like someone that you didn't have a chance to work with that it would have been your dream to work with them?
Yeah. So our firm represented Bobby Brown, um, who's like, he was very, very influential in the whole New Jack Swing movement, et cetera. And his stuff is still my kid, who's 22, he listens to Bobby Brown and all that old stuff, right? I find that pretty funny, right? And even older, he was listening to Al Green this morning. He loves Stevie Wonder, all of that. So it was great to be able to work with Bobby Brown, but I really wanted to work with Whitney Houston. So that's the one person I would have loved to have had interaction with, right? Was Whitney, and I didn't, it didn't get to do any work with Whitney Houston.
It's like you didn't have a chance to meet her at all.
No, I didn't have a chance to meet her, and I would have loved to have met her. I went through the documents, right? Because obviously there was a crossover between her and him, and the prenuptial agreement and all that stuff. But yeah, I didn't actually get a chance to work with Whitney Houston, which would have been a dream.
Yeah, she was great too. She was like on top of the world for a solid moment.
Oh man,
She
yeah. In terms
was,
of singing, none better.
yeah, I mean, definitely up there.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like definitely up there. I mean,
Well, it's hard to put anybody ahead of Aretha Franklin, but there are different types of singers as well. But Whitney Houston is wow, she's got to be up there in anybody's top three.
100%. I mean, there's a whole bucket. I think there's a whole bucket list of like famous people I would love to meet or see at some point that I've never had a chance to yet.
Exactly,
Like
exactly.
their
Yes.
cultural significance. Like I know it's like I know it's not your generation and you're probably not interested in them all, but it's like Drake, like just because of the fact that he's so huge, like he's on the bucket list. I just gotta see him like once, like at some point. Yeah, there's a lot of people like that too. So I completely get it. So this next question comes from Brendan. Because you subtly mentioned your book, The Copyright House of Horrors. You subtly mentioned that a little bit before for a second. So he's curious, when is the book coming out?
That's a good question. I wanted the book to come out this year, but the calendar is ticking now, so that seems doubtful. I have a hard time letting the book go. The book is already 80,000 words. And just to put it in perspective, a typical novel is 60,000 words. So,
I mean,
the book is the only reason the book hasn't come out is I just keep going back and tinkering with it. And, I have an agent who wants to see the book. I have another editor who wants to work with me. And the good thing about my position is because I speak a lot, like this term, it was crazy amount of conferences that I spoke at. And I don't want to do that again next term. It was just too much. When I'm at big audiences, so I have already a built-in market for my book, even without a publisher. And I do want to get a deal. I want a book deal, but even if I don't get a book deal, I feel pretty confident I can sell books because I'm in front of massive audiences, all the time.
yeah, and
So
you already have a pretty much really good fan base.
I
So
do. I
like,
do. I have a good solid base that I could build on. And my sister, who has already written one novel and is on her second novel, she's really riding me, say, "Come on, you got to get that book out there." My wife is riding me, my kids. So when will the book come out? It's going to come out in 2024. I'm really disappointed it wasn't 2023, but
mm.
that's just how it is. It takes a while to get a book out there, right?
I mean, in the meantime, could you give us a little teaser as to what the book would be about, like what you're gonna get into?
Sure. So the book, The Copyright House of Horrors, is a unique novel. I don't think there's ever been a novel about copyright law, and it focuses on the impact on African American artists who've been so essential to the music industry. And the story is based on a biracial kid struggling with issues of identity in this troubled world, and really just trying to figure out who he is. He's 17-year old. His name is Break, and he's half African American, half white, but he wants to know more about his African American culture because he's been raised basically in white neighborhoods and schools. And so he goes to what he thinks is a exhibit on black music downtown in a deserted part of town, actually. And he's abducted by this mysterious figure who I call the guide. He's kind of a Gandalf like, I guess, figure you could say throughout the book, into this underground netherworld called the Copyright House of Horrors. And in the Copyright House of Horrors, there are various wings and sections and areas of it. He learns the horrible ways that copyright law has treated these black artists who created all the music that we love, from the blues and jazz to rock and roll and all the way up to hip hop. And so that's the basics of the story. And he's tasked with a mission, and he has to accomplish that mission. And he meets all these very strange figures along the way, copyright trolls, and these figures I call the minions of the man, who are actually the lackeys of the man. I changed it from minions because I don't want it to be the lackeys of the man. Strange monochromatic creatures who toil night and day over all the documentation, the copyright assignment, mortgages, all the stuff that really keeps the system going. So, it's a fantastical novel. It's part horror, part, fantasy, and hopefully it's something that'll resonate with people. Actually, I was just watching The House of Usher. I don't know if you know about that show that's on Netflix, The Fall of the House of Usher.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's a big show that's happening now, and they had a whole segment in there in the show where they were talking about copyright law. So I said, okay, there's a market for this, right?
Mhm.
In a horror movie, they were
It's
talking about
definitely
copyright law.
interesting, especially where copyright law is going now. You know,
Yes, yes.
seeing big changes in the industry. So yeah, it could be like really interesting. Yeah. So everyone, I mean, 2024, make sure to be on the lookout for this book, check it out.
That's right.
So this next question comes from Shani, and that question is because he's an artist himself, our fellow classmate. He wants to know, what would you say are the pros and cons of signing with a record label?
The devil is in the details. So signing with a record label could be great, but what is the deal? A lot of people have signed with labels and have been really sorely disappointed. The real question with those deals is how much promotion are they going to do for you, first of all? Because we've signed many deals, or I've worked with many artists to sign deals, and absolutely nothing ever happened. And this is very common today too, where they absolutely don't do anything for it. The pros are that if you sign with Universal Music, or you sign with Warner Brothers or Sony or one of the major labels, even one of the mini majors, the advantage of that is that they have a marketing and distribution team, which is, quite honestly, unparalleled, right? The con is are they really going to do all the things that they're able to do? And my experience is most of the time that they don't do those things, by the way. And most artists who do sign end up being very disappointed. And if you read the agreement, it actually doesn't obligate them to produce any sound recording. A lot of artists don't know that. They're not obligated to produce anything under their own agreement. And so, and also, you have to be careful because one team will bring you in, and if people from that team leave, guess what? Nothing's going to happen. And I've seen that happen a number of times where the people who were excited about you as an artist who brought you in leave the company. And people come and go in these companies all the time. So the devil's really going to be in the details. And in this day and age, artists really aren't going to make money from streaming. So they're going to have to think about other ways that they can monetize other than just, their music being out on these distribution channels like Spotify and the like.
Yeah. I mean, would you suggest like more artists to go like independent rather than like sign with a label then?
Well, if they go independent, that's good. But if they want worldwide distribution, people say they don't need labels. Yeah, you do. If you want worldwide distribution of your music, which is where you can get into the bigger money, then you do need a major label to do that because as an independent, you don't have that ability. I think the smart move to me is to start out independent, build your brand, build your fan base, and then you can deal with a major label and you'll get a better deal too. You could get a 50-50 deal where you get to keep 50% of the revenues. You're not going to get that if they sign you with an advance. And that's the other thing about a deal with a major label. If you sign with a major label and you get an advance, you have to understand as the artist, that's probably the only money you're ever going to see for 90+% of them. That advance check that they get is the only money they're ever going to see. So artists really have to be entrepreneurs today
Mhm.
in order to make it. And they really have to drive it. The labels right now aren't doing a lot of development. They're actually scouring TikTok and all these forums to see who's the next big thing. And that's how people are getting signed today. TikTok is probably getting more people signed than anything else. They see that Eden did this song on TikTok. It blew up. He's got all this viewership. And now they're interested in talking to you. The other route is if you have your own money and you go to them, you can get a deal. And people don't know that as well. If you go to Universal with $100,000 or $200,000, sure, they'll work with you. It's kind of like a reverse record deal. In other words, you're paying them money.
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean the way you're saying how like labels may find people through TikTok, would you say like the way TikTok is now, would you say it's similar to how YouTube was in like the early 2000s, 2010s?
Yeah, I think so. They were there. Some people were quote unquote discovered, but people sitting around waiting to be discovered in the music industry are going to be very disappointed.
Mhm.
People ask me this question all the time. And number one, I said, are you doing live performances? You have to do live performances, and that's how you're going to build your fan base. If people come to your show, it means they like you, right?
Yeah.
If they
So
come to your show and you have t-shirts for sale, that's another revenue stream. You show enough of those sales, enough of those views, and now a label's interested in you suddenly. So in other words, they already want you to be viable. We know, Eden, it's not about how talented a singer you are anymore.
it's about how much you can sell.
Exactly.
That's all it is. All
I
right.
mean, I feel bad for your generation because even your generation agrees that most of the music that's coming out now sucks. And
I feel like some
and
pretty good.
it's a very bad time, and particularly in the hip hop space, right? The hip hop is just in a horrible state right now.
Well,
Drake notwithstanding.
I mean, nah, it's like I mean Drake just makes sales. That's all it is. But it's like I feel like hip hop's in an okay space right now. I mean, definitely there's a difference in generations, but I wouldn't think this generation is so to say bad because like I feel like for every Lil Pump there is in this generation, there was a Flava Flav in the generation before. I mean that's my opinion on it all. It's like I'm definitely not the expert here at all, but it's like I feel like that's my opinion. Like for every Biggie and Tupac we have in the last generation, we have Kendrick and J. Cole in this generation and people like that, where it's like they're still poets, I think, in rap. And I feel like that's really important, you know?
Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see
Yeah,
that. At least we're past the mumble rappers now, right? That was a pretty bad stage.
that was pretty bad. That was not great. But I mean the instrumental sounded nice. So at least there's that.
Right, right.
So Professor, we talked a little bit, we touched on this before about how things like AI and streaming are kind of changing um how we see entertainment law and copyright as we know it. So I figured it would be now a good time to address this question from Dennis. He asked, how do you see the world of entertainment law changing with the times, specifically with things such as AI and streaming and things like that?
The only thing we know for sure, it will change. It's already changing. So AI, I think, is going to be a massive kind of transformation in a sense of the industry. Everybody's struggling to figure out what it means. We've got 5, 6, 7, 8 cases in the pipeline on the copyright infringement issue of where they're just training. In other words, having these massive data sets be consumed and transformed into works by AI is copyright infringement. No one knows the answer to that question. Is it copyright infringement? Is it fair use? And we'll probably need some sort of legislative fix. Same thing on the right of publicity, which is maybe even more of a problem because you guys recall the Heart on My Sleeve, the fake Drake song.
Oh yeah.
And that song isn't likely copyright infringement because they didn't use Drake's or The Weeknd's voice, and they didn't use their lyrics or their music. And so it's neither copyright infringement nor right of publicity infringement. And I think the industry really thinks that's untenable. So we'll probably get a new federal right of publicity out of this thing to figure out how to deal with vocal impersonation and all the stuff that's going on. People are making a lot of money, billions of dollars is being invested into this. But my whole thing is that AI also has a massive amount of bias that's built into it because it's not inclusive. The people who actually design the AI systems don't tend to come from so-called marginalized communities. And my whole thing is while they're putting all these billions of dollars into AI, they also need to put in money to address the bias problem because we don't want to carry over all the problems of the old world into this new world.
Yeah, and speaking of the federal rule of publicity that may right of publicity that may come out of all this, you touch on this in class a lot, where you'll be like, "Oh, we're very close to getting a federal rule for this, which would be very beneficial." How would you say it would be beneficial
Well,
to?
right now, the right of publicity, which is the right of people to protect the appropriation of their likeness for commercial purposes, like in advertising or on products and the like, is wholly a state law, and every state is different. Now, if they do make a federal right of publicity, I hope they build it on California law, because California law by far has the strongest right of publicity for artists. And as you know, Eden, my heart is for artists. Even though I work for Warner Brothers and HBO, my heart is with the small artists, not even the Taylor Swifts or the Drakes or the Lady Gagas, but the small artists who's struggling out there to make it. These are the people that really motivate me and inspire me. And as you guys know from class, I get calls on the regular from artists that I don't know who have problems, and I speak to every one of them because that's my pro bono. I'm not practicing law. So my pro bono is talking to these artists, whether they're in film, TV, video games, music, and trying to direct them in the right direction to connect them with lawyers who can help them or other people who can help them in their orbit for it. And so we need artist protection. We need artists to be able to get credit. That's one of the things that I'm fighting for as they talk about uh, you know uh, uh, you know recontextualizing the law in this area. It's very important for it to be artist focused and not just label focused and big video game company focused and big movie studio and television network focused. Our law is not focused on artists. It's designed for the Warner Brothers, the Sonys, the EA video games of the world. And if we're going to make new laws, I think this is a great opportunity to make them more artist focused, because if without the artists, you don't have a TV show, right? You don't have a musical composition, you don't have a play. And yet it's and you know this from studying with me that the law isn't focused on them at all. And now this is an opportunity to kind of remind people, let's protect the people who are actually making the stuff, not just the people who are distributing it.
And honestly, the whole debate as to whether like who's more important to protect, like even though it shouldn't be a debate, it reminds me of a lot. I don't know if you saw the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan.
I didn't.
So basically, like during the later seasons, like because everyone was talking about how Jordan and like the Bulls were winning these championships, like, and Jerry Krause, who was the GM of the Chicago Bulls at the time, was quoted to say, players don't win championships, teams do. So it brought up a whole debate of like who's really responsible for like winning a championship. Is it the players on the team that are playing the game, or is it the general manager that's constructing the whole team? So even though it shouldn't be a debate, it's obviously the players, it's obviously the artists because they're the ones making it happen as we see it. But
Organizations are important too. And
yeah,
you've been around me long enough, though. I'm not a label basher or a studio basher. And in fact, in our advanced entertainment class, we had, the head of music publishing from Universal come in, and we've had other executives come in. I don't make it about people, I make it about systems. And so now, one of the interesting things about the AI emergence is that the labels um, have so far been standing with the artist. The labels have taken the position that, for example, that they don't want AI generated song, wholly AI generated song being nominated for the Grammys. They so right now they're standing with the artist, but my question is, how long is that going to last as they salivate over a world where they don't have to pay artists? I mean, that has to be right. Wouldn't you agree that has
yeah.
to be enticing to them?
I mean that's what the whole writers' strike was about too. I mean, like one
Exactly.
person says,
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I had the pleasure of speaking with the legal team at the Writers Guild. They reached out to me because just like I became Mr. NFT a year and a half ago, now I'm becoming Mr. AI. And in both cases, I didn't want to do it. And in fact, my first AI presentation was, as you know, was at USC a few weeks back, and I wrote a paper. And people really liked the paper, even though I don't think the paper is the greatest thing I've ever seen. But people are hungry for the information about it for it. So to me, it's a very exciting time. It's an exciting time for you guys because AI is going to keep a lot of lawyers busy for a long time. But I'm a different generation. I'm horrified by a world where all the music is just generated by an AI machine. I still want to see artists. I want to see live music. You asked about passions. That's one of my secret passions. I love live music. I love seeing a band. There's nothing to me that replaces that. A DJ is great, but it's not the same thing. So now we have to figure out where the artist going to be in all of this. And like you said, the Writers Guild, I think they got a very good deal by all accounts. They are, they can use AI because artists use AI too. AI has good as well. It's not all negative, but they can't cut the writers out by making a completely AI generated television show. And I think that's the right thing. We need people, right? Not machines.
yeah, and I actually touched on this in my first ever episode of the show. I brought on a friend, Mikey. He works in music as well as a DJ, and we talked about AI music for a second. And it's like I remember saying it's like I listen to a lot of smaller artists right now, people such as Grave 3, Red Veil, people who are like really like they're very good in my opinion, but they have a very small fan base right now because they're young, they're on the come up, they're not signed to a huge label and things like that. And I just want to see a world where it's like they're able to blow up because they have the talent to do so and the marketing and all that. Like they could do it. It's so possible. But I don't want to listen to Drake in the year 2080. I want to listen to new people. Like like people should have a chance to like come up and like take the spotlight for a little bit instead of AI just pumping out familiar stuff, you know.
Well, we'll see the direction it takes, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Um, labels, like I said, they say we're going to stand behind the artist, but let's see if that continues.
God willing, hopefully,
Yeah.
um so Professor, the way the show works is like I said before, I always ask the first question and I also always ask the last question, and that question is always, if you had to give one piece of advice to the people watching at home right now, what would you tell them?
As law students or in what
I mean,
context?
as law students, as people, as anything.
I mean,
Well,
I think the number one thing I would tell them is think about what's really going to make you happy, right? Particularly in terms of your career choices and your work choices. Think about what's going to make you happy. I am happy as can be. I love being an academic. I feel like I was born to be an academic. I love writing. I love doing a lot of research. I love thinking deeply about issues. You have to find what the sweet spot is for you, and don't chase the money because money is very important. There's no doubt about that. But if you find yourself in a situation, and I've been in this situation where you're making a lot of money, but every day you go to work and you're miserable, you are not going to be happy. So what makes you happy? What are you passionate about? And also, who can you help? I think those are the most powerful questions you can ask, because the more people you can help, the more chance of success you have, right? And I know that's contrary to our culture, which says everybody grab what they can, and screw the next person. But I think if you live out of that thing of like, great, what can I contribute? What can I give? And also, you have a right to be happy. Everybody listening has a right to be happy. Their own happiness is indestructible. And once you find that, I've been through tough times. A lot of people don't know it. I've been through tough times. I've been through physical illness. I've been through financial crises, right? Where I didn't have any money over the years. But you know what? We look back on those times and we were happy. We preserved a space of happiness. And I know this is hard in law school, particularly because law school is almost designed to make you miserable, isn't it?
I mean,
But
honestly, it's like I like law school. I'm happy to be there. It's like I can understand why some people are miserable, but it's
for a
like
lot of people, it's a very miserable experience for them. As one of our graduates said, who again, she's now the head of DirecTV, managing over 25 people and over $1 billion worth of business. She talked about how in law school she felt beat up, by it. And I wasn't very happy camper in law school. I was happy because of the social, you know, part of it, because I like to party and have a good time, but I wasn't happy in terms of but in any event, find that happiness. That ought to be the focus, right? And I know that's contrary to what you guys are being taught. Find the thing that pays you the most money, blah, blah, blah. But if you find the thing that makes you happiest, you're going to find a way to make the money out of that.
do what makes you happy, people. Professor, thank you so much for coming on. If you guys like this episode, make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to follow the socials, figure out what's going on with our next guest, what's going on with the show, the links are all down below. If you want to see what's going on with Professor Greene, I'm going to add his links down below also. And on that, this has been Professor Kevin Greene. My name is Ed Toronto, and I will see you guys next week.
Yeah.
Up.